Joining us, MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar, chief Washington correspondent at Midas Touch and host of Scott MacFarlane Reports, Scott MacFarlane, and creator of Below the Stack on Substack, Charles Blow. All right, let's talk about the nuts and bolts of this. And again, Scott, I start with that Air Force One clip because I do want to help our viewers and everyone out there understand the tension here. Obviously, the American government wants to protect national security. And obviously, they want to keep leaking to a minimum. And obviously, they want to push back on reporting. That's a given. But at the same time, there is a reason for the American public to know when a president potentially cuts corners.
The national security interests here are clear. The safety, the well-being of Air Force One and the president is beyond question. But the tactic being used here to suss out leaks, well, that's questionable in so many ways. Our mutual friend Barbara McQuaid and I were talking about this on air this morning, and Barb said you use these subpoenas of reporters as a last-ditch effort to get information about leaks inside your administration. There are many other tools at your disposal to do your own internal reviews to try to find this kind of information out. And if this is an attempt, Katie, to chill reporters in the future, they have wildly miscalculated how reporters work. This does not serve as a disincentive. This serves as an incentive for reporters to continue doing their work because it underscores that work's importance. What it can do, though, is chill other sources inside government from revealing information for the public's good in the future, and that should be troubling to everybody.
Let's get to the core of the reporting for a moment. Priya, this plane was rushed into service. You also learned about the lack of the same features as the last plane. You reported it, you and our colleagues here at MS Now before the New York Times. What did you learn and what sort of pushback did you get?
Yeah, that's right, Katie. And I'd actually been reporting on the security and ethical concerns prior to President Trump's trip to NATO, when many sources told me that they would advise the president to not use this Qatari gifted jet on overseas trips, but maybe just for domestic purposes. And that's because they really expedited the timeline here to stand up this airplane to meet the needs of the presidential mission. You know, the Air Force One is supposed to be essentially like a flying White House situation room, and it's supposed to have the same command and control capabilities as the president would be able to do on the ground. That's receive classified intelligence briefings, communicate with military officials, authorize orders like the airstrikes that we saw on Iran, and especially given the fact that we've seen renewed hostilities with Iran and the broader region in the Middle East, it's even more so important right now to make sure that the president's Air Force One is safe and secure to fly him from that NATO summit in Turkey to the United Kingdom and beyond to the United States. So this wasn't a revolutionary idea. People have been talking about the security concerns with this airplane for about a year and a half now. But as Scott just said, I think issuing these subpoenas, the Department of Justice has told the New York Times, listen, we're not so interested in the journalists themselves. We're more interested in looking for the leakers here. But these are all just intimidation tactics that this administration has used repeatedly. They've used it with us at the Pentagon press corps, trying to get us to sign a policy and then revoking our press credentials if we didn't sign it. So it's just par for the course with this administration, really, with any sort of reporting that they consider embarrassing or disparaging.
Yeah, they wanted to be able to approve your reporting, and that's why all the Pentagon reporters got up and walked out. And again, just to emphasize, when we're talking about Air Force One, these aren't theoretical conversations. There have been situations, as we just outlined at the top after 9/11, where Air Force One was a command and control center as the White House was trying to figure out what in the world had happened and what was still likely to happen. That was a chaotic moment where very much was up in the air. I wonder, Priya, are they still planning on using this new Air Force One, even amid all of this reporting regarding what it lacks?
Well, I think it's been really interesting in my reporting. Every time we've reached out to the White House or Air Force officials, they've been insistent that no shortcuts were taken when standing up this Air Force One. They say that they prioritize the mission essentials over the aesthetics, which isn't what we're hearing from people who are really familiar with this aircraft and know the process, which, by the way, usually takes years and billions of dollars. So it was fascinating to see that despite all of that, again, President Trump decided to fly on the plane to Turkey, but also that he decided not to fly on the plane and to go on the older Air Force One after those security concerns were raised. So this is a president who doesn't like to admit that he's done anything wrong. They still haven't come out and said that there's anything wrong with this plane. So I would imagine at this point that he's going to continue to use this Air Force One to sort of prove this point that it's completely okay.
So one of the questions I have, and again, I think it is warranted for a White House or any administration to say we want to find leakers regarding national security. But it's hard to disentangle whether this is really about national security or if it's something that's more about showing that Donald Trump put his own comfort and his own sense of, or desire for bigness and greatness and being able to brag about his new plane over the national security interests of the American public. After all, his life is incredibly important to the security of this country.
Right. I think both things are true. Not only is he on that plane, there are hundreds of other people on that plane, including journalists. No one can allow the plane to be attacked and to go down because you're not just risking your life, you're risking the life of other people who may not even know that this plane is not equipped in the way that the other one was equipped. The Air Force One is a military plane outfitted to carry people. This plane is a passenger plane outfitted to try to pretend to be a military plane. It just can't do it. It's not equipped in the same way. And so that is a problem. And he's made that mistake. But the bigger point here is that Donald Trump is across the board trying to dismantle the watchdogs in society. That is the media, that is the judicial system, that is anyone who has investigatory power, regulators. And so the media has become a favorite target of his. And I do agree with one of the other panelists, which is that it emboldens reporters. But the problem is that it does chill because the DOJ is the biggest law firm in the world by a long shot. Mm-hmm. Thousands of attorneys. 100,000 people work there. They are funded by the U.S. government. You put that onto a news organization, they're just not equipped. They don't have the money to pay for this.
Well, that's also a good point. And you and Scott are both on Substack now. When you have the backing of a major news organization, the New York Times or a news network, you have the luxury of having the lawyers of that network there to work on your behalf. You have the protection of the system that you are embedded in, which has gone toe to toe with the federal government and has won in the past. Yes. But as our information gets diversified in the way that it has, and so many reporters are forced to go out on their own because our system is just not as robust as it once was. I mean, do we risk really coming into an era where people don't feel they have the support to push back?
That is the absolute danger here. Take the university example first. The Trump administration went after the big ones. These are the ones with the most money. If they could make any of them fall, any of them crumble, then the other ones would obey because they exactly, or Columbia. No one else, everybody else looking at that says, we don't even have the money to play this game. We might be right. We just don't have the money to defend this. And so what we saw was lesser schools started to just obey in advance. They just started to do it anyway. No one was pressuring them to do it. If you take that same model and apply it to the news media, you could see how that could become a real problem. The big boys do have big law practices and money, but the people down the ladder don't have that. And if I'm looking at that as an independent journalist, a Substack journalist, or maybe just a startup person in a local community, I have 4 reporters and I'm running this, going out getting ads on the weekend, just try to stay alive. I can't survive a single lawsuit